we'll discuss about what is RPA and what kind of processes we can automate in a organization, and general overall robotic process automation history, and what are the terminologies we use generally in that. The first RPA was introduced in 2000, early 2000, and but the full-fledged project was launched in 2012. After 12, it was stable. I mean, the market came to know about RPA, and they are implementing RPA in their organizations. So the major tools in the market is right now UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, and Microsoft Power Automate, which is recently launched a year ago. It's in the market. So we discuss more about Power Automate.
Okay.
And any questions, Bharat, you can interrupt me. I will stop then and there, and I will clarify the questions, and then we move ahead.
Sure.
And the next thing we can discuss about what is right RPA use cases, meaning what kind of processes we can automate in an organization. So generally, any business process automation we can automate when we know what is the next step priorly, meaning we will define the process steps in prior, and those steps should not change in that business process. So those kind of automations we can do, which can perform within a system. So what is RPA and a question? Generally, we can say a software which do repetitive task. It's a simple one-line statement, but we will discuss more on that because RPA evolved a lot. Initially, it was to do a repetitive task, but it evolved a lot wherein it can perform some artificial intelligence before doing any step calculations kind of thing, and interacting with a business application. It may be a Windows or web applications. So in general or predefinedly, the definition was like RPA is a software or an entity which performs predefined steps to achieve a task. So to achieve a task, and it will generate some output and send it to the end user. In my words, I can say that it's a digital employee which sits in a system or a computer and wait for commands to execute a predefined task. A predefined task is nothing but a group of steps which can be performed in a system to achieve a result. So any questions here, Bharat? So what is RPA and Bantu? Bharat? Okay.
Sai garu?
Any questions?
I think headset పెట్టడం వల్ల I think my voice బయటికి రావట్లేదు. Now clear. As of
okay.
now. Yeah.
So when it comes to RPA phases, any software development, the design, development, testing, deployment, these are the major stages. So first one, but when it comes to RPA lifecycle, first one is identifying a process. In an organization, identifying a process is the first step, then design, development, testing, deployment, and monitoring also, because RPA is continuous evolvement based on the business application changes. We need to integrate the same kind of behavior in our RPA also. So monitoring also an aspect or a life cycle. So there will be 7 stages or 7 phases we can say in an RPA. The first one is identifying the process, what kind of business process we can automate in an organization. So we need to study their manual processes and suggest or come up with the RPA process we can automate. Business processes we can automate, and then we will design it and develop it, testing, deployment, and monitoring also. So this is general RPA phases or life cycle. And when it comes to OCR tools, OCR is generally optical character recognition, meaning when there is any scanned documents which it's not in a readable way. It may be a PDF Word document. A scanned document can't be read by our system directly. We need to use OCR technology there, and there are plenty of OCR tools available like Tesseract, Microsoft, Google Cloud, Abiflexi, and many more. many more comes to, and what we use is AI builder built in Power Automate. So that will become in the topic when we discuss about Power Automate. So we have already discussed about what is RPA. So in my words, I can say it's a digital employee which will sit in a system and wait for the commands to execute a predefined business automation, business process, and how it is different from the traditional automation. So traditional automation was generally between the business applications to interact some data between them and to generate some reports. So that is a kind of traditional automation. So when it comes to RPA, it's a mimicking of human actions with a front end of a business application. It may be a web or Windows. So using front end design like a human, it will mimic the human actions like send keys, click mouse actions and everything, and get the perform the predefined steps to get an output of a business process. When it comes to key terminologies, one is processes, which is business processes. We generally say it as a requirement which we need to achieve, and the other one is robots. It's a tool which will sit in an organization and listen for the commands from the orchestrator to execute a process. So the actual human mimicking actions or steps or decision making, everything will be done by this robot, and it will get the package or a predefined code of a particular business process and it will execute. So it will just wait for the trigger action to get the command to execute particular process. So that is actually robot. And human in the loop, whenever there is a human interaction needed for any particular process, then it's called human in the loop, meaning it's not an unattended bot. So we'll discuss more about this once we in our next topic. So this is about human in the loop. And the next one is ROI, return on investment. So every organization go for this RPA to get some returns. It may be in terms of human hours or number of, time consuming to perform a process. So the timing and the number of efforts for the human reduce is overall the return on investment, how much they invest to execute a process and how many human hours it reduced and what kind of performance and speed it implementing while doing those steps. So this is on return on. So based on various aspects, we will come up with the ROI sheet. So use cases, I can say, can all manual tasks can be automated? No, not all manual tasks can be automated unless it is a predefined. If we know what is the next step, then only such kind of steps can be automated. If we don't know that what is will be the next step, it entirely on human decision, then we can't implement it. So RPA or a use case, we need to pick that what is the next step, we need to know purely. Then only we can configure it or we code it and we will execute it. If we don't know what is the next step, then we are it is such cases are not suitable to automate. And how do we identify right candidate for automation? When I say right candidate, it's nothing but right processes or right use case or right requirement. As I mentioned, it should be so previously it was like it should be a repetitive task with huge volume. Why it is huge volume? Because to get the RPA license and implementation, so it's a cost. And if we perform any business process which will done yearly once with less volume, then it's waste of implementing that, because there will be no ROI, return on investment. There will be no ROI, if there is any business process which will done yearly once with less volume, because a human can done in 1 hour, who will spend 1 hour for an year to perform this business process. No need to implement such kind of process. So if there is any business process which will take huge human efforts and a repetitive task or with a high volume, it may not be repetitive task, but with a high volume to perform a business process, such kind of task can be done in such kind of task. Business process is best requirement to pick, because there will be huge ROI in that. Any questions here, Bharat?
No, Saiga, just I'm listening all. So
Okay.
as of now, no. Yeah, thank you.
And key points to be considered in identifying a candidate, identifying a requirement is, as I discussed, high manual and repetitive task, rule-based process. It should be rule-based process, meaning we need to know what will be the next step in such cases, meaning if there is a data A, what is the next step to do, X or Y? Based on this data, go with perform these steps. If the data is this, perform these steps. So these rules need to be defined already. And low exception rate, meaning the behavior of the business application or a web application or the data which we are working on should have less changes, meaning it should not change frequently. If it is frequently changes, then it's difficult to identify what will be the next step. So low exception rate is required, and the well-defined inputs and outputs, meaning what will be the input for the business process and what is the output of a business process. Generally, the inputs are from an Excel file or Word document, from any document or from any web application, from a email. So these are the different kind of inputs. And when it comes to outputs also, it may be an Excel, email, or inserting any keying any data in a business application. So this kind of outputs will be the will be there in generally, and it should be high volumes. Then only the human hours put in on that business process will be reduced. And the next one is automation savings, which comes under ROI. If all above is suitable or available in a requirement, then automatically we will have an automation savings. So this is generally a feasibility study. What kind of processes we can take. So the first step is the SA collaborates with the BA to perform feasibility studies, meaning the one member from the RPA team will collaborate with the other member from the business process who actually manually performs those steps. We will interact and check, is it feasible for the RPA or not. So as I mentioned, these are the feasibility tests we need to choose. It is a highly manually and repetitive and rules-based task and low exception rate. And so these kind of limitations are there. And the next one is establishing what is in and out of the scope of the RPA. So we came to know about a business process with these are the steps. And we need to decide what are the steps we can do in RPA and what is out of scope. If there is any human interaction is needed, or either those steps not required to do when implement in RPA. So this kind of documentation or a understanding we need to have. And the next one is taking part in the as is process walkthroughs. As is, what is manually currently doing in a business process. We need to understand that. We need to train ourselves manually how to do that process. So that way, it will be very easy for to implement in RPA. So that is as is process. And when it comes to be process, after implementing RPA, how it will be? Uh, if if a business process manual steps are 10, but when we implement in RPA, we can reduce this to six steps. Then we need to come up with such as is document and to be document. And we need to discuss that with the SME, subject matter experts, or from the client to the client. And we will need to take the approval. So once we have the approval, then we will design that to be document and come up with input data, output data, and what are the integrations, scheduling, and everything. That is fifth one. So which is comes to design phase as we discussed. And thinking about the potential challenges, meaning after a while we're working, what are the potential challenges we get for this business automation. So we can, once we know the steps, we can forecast such kind of things and document it. And suggesting any optimization, as I mentioned, 10 steps to 6 steps to doing. So we need to suggest these things in the to be process document. And identifying and raising technical bottlenecks. If there is any technical challenges which we can't achieve in the RPA, we need to identify and raise in the design phase only, or in the identifying a process phase only. So this is about feasibility study. And these are the RPA phases, which we already discussed. One is infrastructure setup, meaning a system. It may be a
So
physical or cloud.
Saigar, so this is RPA life cycle, right? These six
Correct.
steps. Okay, okay,
Correct.
okay, fine.
The first one is identifying the process and setting up the environment for the RPA. It may be a physical machine or a cloud virtual machine. With the Windows client OS is enough to execute a process. And of course, required business applications need to be there. Based on the business process, what are the business applications and access to an email. So everything need to be there in that particular machine. And then designing, the preparation is nothing but agreeing on the as is and to be documentations. Like if there are 10 steps manually performed, we are coming up with the 6 steps only by optimizing few steps, because RPA has inbuilt memory and everything, so it can read any document and store all the information in one place, and we can reuse it. When it comes to manual, every record to record they need to view and perform the action. But when it comes to RPA, it can store entire a table or an Excel file, a documentation, and use the data accordingly. And the design, workflow design. So generally PDD document, process design document, will be done here with the flow diagrams and data flows and step-by-step actions. So and at the design phase only we can come up with the test cases. What kind of data, if we pass, what step need to perform. If the data is in wrong format, how the exception need to be there. Meaning what kind of alert we need to, what kind of why just Druvita silent now. What kind of alerts we need to raise to the client. It may be an email or skip that record and update the status that failed. So this kind of all business process requirements or designing will be done based on the steps involved in that process. And the next one is development. Go ahead and use the studio of respective tool and design, perform the steps mimicking the human actions and other related business process steps, and then test it, doing quality assurance in different use cases what we have come up. And then it's will go on ongoing process. Hypercare is nothing but monitoring if there is any performing challenges or in ongoing, if there is any changes in the business applications. So how to handle that, we need, it's an ongoing process, so we need to monitor by having the email alerts or other things. So this is about RPA, Bharat. If you have any questions now, you can shoot it.
So this hypercare means it's like a change management, kada Saigaru. So like you
not only change management, hypercare, it's completely about in monitoring and support. Yes, monitoring and supports comes under hypercare. So we will monitor. There may be a behavior change in the business application one time and bot failed. On rerun, it will perform or process the requirement. So such kind of things will be monitored. But if there is any sustainable changes comes in a business process, then we need to implement it.
Okay. So after testing, we will go for implementation.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's in production. It's in
deployment or
production.
yeah. Okay,
And
okay.
this hypercare will come after production.
Okay, okay.
So monitoring and managing changes, the business application may change after 1 year. So until and unless there is no changes and it's running smoothly, so we just monitor that. If there is any new change or CSS changes or element ID changes, we need to recapture and apply. So it's a hypercare monitoring and
changing. If
enhancements
there any
also. Yeah,
changes, we can do there. Okay, okay.
correct, correct.
Fine, fine. Okay, fine. Got it, Saigar.